So, I gave it a 7 out of 10 rating for the Supertest server stats without knowing the actual armor profiles. Is that actually justified? Well, after taking a look on the common test server, yes, it is completely justified, and I may increase it to 8.5 out of 10. It is just that insane. So you may say that the gun sucks, garbage penetration, garbage DPM, accuracy, aim time, lack of ammo, all are terrible. It's slow, has no view range, and I completely agree. But it has a lot of health and the same armor as a tier 10 heavy tank against tier 6s like Sherman's, M6, or 𝘒𝘪𝘥𝘥𝘰𝘴s. So yeah, you're going to cry your eyes out and roll over dead if you're playing a low tier vehicle against this thing. So we're going to have a similar situation to the Object 252U with this vehicle. It is the K-2 Russian heavy tank, so a premium tier 8 that's going to be sought after like the Object 252U and just as terrifying. So let's take a look, but it's a premium, makes more credits and crew XP, fits crew of 4, so all the Russian heavy tanks, but it has the D25T, garbage penetration of a 122. So yeah, it's pretty bad, but remember, about 5 years ago, the penetration of the D25T is about 175. They actually buffed it twice, once to 185 and again to 196. So we have come a long way for the IS-6 or IS-2 or IS-1, but this penetration is still below average, so kind of bad. But here is the firepower. Fires AP for normal shell, high exposed anti-tank for gold, alpha average for Russian heavy tank gun 122. So DPM sucks, 1600, similar to a T-34, so pretty bad. Accuracy, Russian garbage 0.42. Aim time is actually above average compared to the IS-6 or IS-3 or KV-4 for that matter. Wait, not if we're using the 107. If we're using the 122 on the KV-4, it's actually better, but nobody uses that. 6 degrees of gun depression, 25 elevation, 24 degrees for the 𝘔𝘪𝘥𝘥𝘰𝘴. Not bad. It is a Russian heavy tank. It's not slow, but here is tanks.gg with the actual dispersion factors. So don't shoot the gun while moving this tank. You're not supposed to with that garbage DPM. Don't do that. So just sit still and turn the turret around. But 𝘔𝘪𝘥𝘥𝘰𝘴 dispersion factor is actually not bad. So pretty decent. Shell velocity, slow. So then again, it is the D25T with AP shell. Obviously, you're used to that if you played the IS-6 for a long time, obviously. But compare this to the Object 252U, and we can see it's practically the same DPM. Practically. Well, the same reload time. It has a little bit better DPM on the Object 252U because of the alpha, and obviously the penetration is better. But this vehicle has better terrain resistance, so that's a plus. Shell velocity also a lot slower. Oh, oof. But it has better gun elevation, so obviously it's a lot slower than the Object 252U. And you may say, yeah, it's not that worthwhile, right? Well, the armor is different for this vehicle. So here is the caveat that separates this vehicle from the Object 252U. So for survivability, 1700 health, quite chunky for a tier 8, so similar to a KV-4, but frontal hull is 160 at the front. So here is the actual armor profile. So at a distance, upper plate is about 250 millimeters effective without sloping or without angling of the hull. Lower plate is about 230, so shoot gold shell to the lower plate, but that is practically the same as an Object 252U. Don't shoot the cheeks of the hull. It's 325 to 350. Don't even shoot the cheeks. there is a small strip between the turret and the hull where it's only 25, but that is a pixel of a strip, so at a distance it's even harder to shoot at that pixel, and you're just hitting the turret front or the hull front, so don't even think about it. But at a distance, yeah, shoot the lower plate, it's about 230. So it does have weak spots for the turret front, but it has 250 millimeters or 300, never mind, for the cheeks of the turret, and auto bounce for the sides, don't even think about it. Above the mantlet is about 208, but it is small pixelated area, so that might be a weak spot. But then again, it is space armor, so sometimes the gun just eats it and just damages the gun without actually damaging the vehicle. But there is the famous or infamous gun access port of 30 millimeters for above the turret. So shoot here and you'll overmatch the turret roof and automatically pin. So that is the main weak spot for this turret. So it's like the IS-3 in a sense, but the cupola is small, so 90 millimeters for the cupola. And you can also jam a shot here, it will pin, but you have to be taller than this vehicle to do so. And with tier 6s having about, say, 85 millimeter guns, let's see, 85 millimeter gun, yeah, you cannot overmatch the turret roof for the gun access port, so it will bounce. You have to go for the smaller cupolas on this vehicle, and it's smaller than the Object 252U, so even harder to hit. And with 24 degrees of turret traverse, hitting that thing is a nightmare, especially for a lower tier vehicle. Now here is the main difference between this vehicle and the IS-4, other than the gun access port weak spot, but it actually has space armor above the tracks. It has 30 millimeters of space armor covering the hull sides, so it's about 600 millimeters effective when side scraping. Oh god, that is pretty nuts. To about 500, yeah, only 500. Between the tracks, it's about 340, and this degree of angling is pretty wide. So it's not like 45 degrees, but if it's like 45 degrees, it's still 400 millimeters effective above the tracks, and between the tracks, it's still 300. You can easily bait out shots with something like this. But then again, if they shoot at the front of the road wheel, it's only about 240, so don't expose that much. But upper plate is still pretty well angled, so it's about 270-ish if you're exposing the cheeks of the upper plate. 300 for the front, 260 for the lower plate. Yeah, it's insane. So there's still the crevice of the pixel part. Actually, it's gone now. It is a very small pixelated part between the turret and hull. It's not reliable to shoot there. You're wasting your shot. Just go for the cupolas, but it has space armor for the side of the hull, whereas the actual IS-4 doesn't have it. So here is the IS-4, but it doesn't have space armor. It only has 160 above the tracks. No 30 millimeters of space armor. So technically, that vehicle is more effective than the actual IS-4. Surprisingly. I mean, IS-4 doesn't have as weak of a gun access port on top of the turret, so it's 52, not 30. So shooting here is a lot more difficult into overmatching the gun access port, and the cupolas are smaller and better rounded, so it's about 220 or 140, but it's a lot smaller for the commander and loader. But remember, this is at tier 8 against a bunch of tier 6s. Yes, Sam, it will not hold up to a tier 10 shooting gold shell. I get it, but if you are stalling a tier 10 with a tier 8, then your team's tier 10 is wrecking their tier 8s, right? So if you're keeping the enemy's tier 10s occupied with your tier 8s, then you're giving your tier 10s a free pass on their flank or their tier 8s in that sense. And this vehicle is crazy to do that. So mobility wise, yeah, it's okay. Only 30 kilometers per hour top speed, so not the greatest, but 14 for reverse. That's decent enough. Hull traverse, 24 degrees per second, not bad. About 13.64 horsepower per ton ratio, so similar to an Object 252U. But here is comparison of the terrain resistance again. So it actually has better terrain resistance than the 252U at the cost of horsepower per ton ratio and top speed. So, and tank traverse for the hull. So it is slower, obviously, but Object 252U is an IS-7 prototype at tier 8. This is an IS-4, so obviously IS-4 is slower than IS-7, but camouflage rating, surprisingly, not as bad, but then again, 6.9, nice, is practically the same as 5 or 6, so giggity. But view range, Russian 350, so overall, here is the comparison with its brethrens at tier 8, so Object 252U, the 703 version number 2, but it is about the same in terms of DPM, quote unquote. It has about 1 shell less, but accuracy, Russian. Aim time is actually close to that of the IS-6. What the hell is the IS-6? 2.68. That is insane. Did I take off stuff? Did they buff the IS-6 in the meantime that I did not know about? Apparently so. Well, apparently the IS-6 has been buffed, and I haven't been playing it for like 2 or 3 years. Oh well. But better than the IS-5, better than the Corvette's 1. Obviously, penetration is one of the worst, so similar to IS-6, but yeah, IS-6, well, doesn't have the armor as a K-2, so that might be the difference for the matchmaking. Also doesn't have the health, but compare this to the Object 252U, and obviously everybody knows about the cupola weak spot. It is a lot more prominent on the Object 252U, and the side scraping capabilities of this vehicle is obviously not as strong as the K2. Upper plate 227, between the tracks 200. If you're exposing that much, like 45 degrees, it's only 200, so easily pinned. So we're sloping like that on the K2, and the rear end has about 400 millimeters, or at least 300 above the hull. So if you're shooting here, yeah, don't shoot above the hull or above the tracks, but between the tracks it's only 200. So frontal armor is about the same as the Object 252U. So lower plate about 215, 230-ish. Don't shoot the upper plate, it's a bad idea. And obviously go for the cupola weak spots, but I don't know. It's very scary to face this vehicle. And all you have to do to mitigate the weak spots of the gun performance as well as penetration and DPM is just using gold shell. Switch to high explosive anti-tank, and practically most of the problem with the penetration is gone. So yeah, I think this is pretty good. 8.5 out of 10, but it's a similar situation with the Object 252U. So newbies who are driving stuff like M6s or KV-1S or T150, let's say Germans with VK3601H, oh my god. Cry your eyes out. You cannot pin this thing with tank destroyers like Nashorns. Nah, 200 millimeters of pin, I'll laugh in your face with the K2. Yeah, it's cute, but you're not gonna pin, so M6, no question. ARL 44, sure. But remember, you're supposed to go up against tier 10s as well as tier 6s yes, this will face tier 10s, but if you're stalling with the armor while fighting with tier 10s, your tier 10s have an opportunity to flank around or just kill their tier 8s outright, right? So if this thing could stand up to a tier 10 and stall for your team, that makes this vehicle pretty good. So it's a similar situation where if you hold down with the T-32 and you're facing tier 10s, eating their time up and stalling them, giving your tier 10s more time to work around and flank around, that's a win for your team. So basically, you don't need the firepower to stand up to a tier 10. This thing could do that. So I would still say it's an 8.5 out of 10. It is a very, very good heavy tank. It's not meant for dealing damage as a tank destroyer. It is not meant for flanking around like a fast medium tank. It does its job well. So weak spots are very small, very minimal to be penetrated by the gun access port or the cupola. But if you're hull down or side scraping correctly, it is a scary tier 8 against tier 9s and tier 10s. It can hold its own. So that's why vehicles like T-32 could stand its own against tier 10s, even though it doesn't have the gun depression or penetration against tier 10s. It can stand its own with the turret front, and that's what it's needed to stall the game for your tier 10s to work around. So similar situation with the Chrysler K, similar situation with, let's see, what's another good tier 8 against a bunch of tier 10s, like the 𝘒𝘪𝘥𝘥𝘰𝘴. That's another good choice. So just the turret front help you to stand your ground against tier 10s while your tier 10s work around and try to break the stalemate. So yeah, for this vehicle, 8.5 out of 10. That's my strategic rating of this thing. So pretty scary, but let me know what you guys think of this vehicle. Obviously, like I said, firepower does not stand up to a tier 10, but that's not what's required. What's required is you for stalling your opponents until your tier 10s could work around. But it does its job very well. So 8.5 out of 10. But thank you guys for watching this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
And now I understand what you tried to say to me, how you suffered for your sanity, and how you tried to set them free. They would not listen, they did not know how.